Welcome back to Simple as Gourmet. I'm Hillary, and today we're going to talk about my favorite topic, sourdough. I started my sourdough starter 3 years ago, and this was before COVID made sourdough popular. So there wasn't a whole lot of videos and tutorials available for me to figure out how to sourdough, for recipes, and how to start it. So I had to start completely from scratch, and it was a lot of trial and error. So I'm here to make this video so that you don't have to go through that, and I hope to make it as simple as possible for you. Let's talk about the benefits and why sourdough is so much better for you. Grains contain a lot of minerals, which are very beneficial to us. However, those minerals are limited by something called phytic acid, also known as phytates. Through the fermentation process, those phytates get broken down, causing those minerals to become more available to our bodies, which is why sourdough is much more beneficial than conventional bread. There's a couple ways that you can obtain your own sourdough starter. The first is by purchasing one online. You can go to my blog, and under the sourdough tab, you'll see a link to a reputable company that I trust where you can purchase your own sourdough starter. The second is if you know somebody who has a sourdough starter, you can ask to just have some of theirs. That would probably be the easiest way to obtain a sourdough starter. But the third is to make your own sourdough starter, and that's what I'm going to teach you today. It's super simple. All it is flour and water. So you're going to want to use a glass jar or bowl, it doesn't matter, just nothing metal or it will react. I find that using a funnel just makes it easier to add the flour and water to your mason jar. So that's just a little tip for you. I like to use organic all-purpose flour. I buy a large bag at Costco. That seems to be the cheapest price that I have found. You can use bread flour, whole wheat flour, just keep it in the wheat family. But I'm always going to recommend the organic flour because wheat scores really high in glyphosate, which is a pesticide that they spray over the wheat. When I don't use organic flour, I don't get the rise in my sourdough starter or in my recipes like I do when I use organic flour. So I'm always going to recommend organic flour. So first of all, you're just going to take half a cup of the flour, and I highly recommend almost sifting your flour just slightly so that it becomes a little bit more airy and fluffy so that you don't have such a thick amount of flour. So I'm just going to add half a cup of flour to my mason jar, and I'm going to add a fourth cup of filtered water to my flour. And I'm just gonna give it a mix and stir it around. You're gonna wanna use non-chlorinated water. When I was starting off, I would always purchase the filtered water from the grocery store, just in the gallons, because our tap water contained a lot of chlorine and fluoride, and that will definitely kill your starter. So you're gonna wanna use filtered water. We have since purchased a Berkey filtration system, and that filters out all the contaminants in the water. You may need to add a little bit more water to your mixture. I was just having a hard time mixing the flour and water together. So now I just added just a tiny bit more water so that it was fully incorporated all together. And it's just, if you can see, it's just like a really thick consistency. And that is what you want. I like to use a spatula to scrape down all the flour off the sides of the jar because it's just gonna get really glued on to the side of the jar and hard to remove later. So just scrape down the sides, give it a good mix, and your last step is to just take some cheesecloth or a tea towel, something that allows the air to just circulate but keeps bugs out if you're doing this in the summer. And I just wrap it with a rubber band, and then I'm just gonna let this rest on the counter for 24 hours. Make sure it's in a warm environment. You wanna kinda keep the temperature between 68 and 75. Okay, we made it to day 2. Here is my little starter. You can see that there are some bubbles that have formed overnight, which was super exciting. It's been a few years since I've done this, so it gets exciting every time. What you're gonna do today is you're gonna discard half of this, remove it, and give it a fresh start. So I'm just gonna take half of this starter. This really has not done anything for us yet, so we're just gonna throw it away. I have half of my starter here left. We're gonna take our organic flour again, and we're gonna add half a cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of filtered water. Okay, so just give it a good mix. Make sure it's fully incorporated. Again, it's gonna appear pretty thick. There's not much of a smell yet, but give it a few days and we'll get there. So just scrape down the sides and we're gonna let this rest on the counter for another 24 hours. And that's it, that's day 2. Okay, we are on day 3 and I'm super excited because there are so many bubbles and it's still just as exciting as the first time. However, I don't think I had this many bubbles the first time around on day 3. If you don't see this much activity, don't worry about it. Yours will come around. Just give it a few more days. We have a few more feedings before you might start seeing some activity, so don't be discouraged. I will show you what it looks like from the inside. These beautiful little bubbles are starting to become active. It's not smelling as sweet or that yeast sour smell yet. But we'll get there. So what we're gonna do again today is discard half of this and we're going to add half a cup of flour and a quarter cup of water. Ooh, it's getting very bubbly. Give this a good mix. And what we're gonna do this time, what I should have done yesterday, because I did notice that it did some growing, is we're going to mark our jar. So a lot of people will use a rubber band around their jar and start, here's my water flour mixture, see if there's any growth tomorrow. I will just take like a piece of tape, cover it back up with a tea towel and my rubber band. We're gonna give it another 24 hours. And I may have strategically placed the spread here to give you encouragement and hope that this process works. So don't be discouraged because pretty soon you too will be making a beautiful loaf like that. All right, you made it to day 4 and hopefully you're seeing some activity because I am seeing lots of happy little bubbles in there and I even got some rise. You can see where I left off from yesterday. If you're not seeing a ton of activity, maybe try finding a warmer spot in your home. That's where you want to keep your starter, especially at the beginning when it's starting to grow. All right, we're gonna do the same thing we did yesterday and we're going to discard half of our starter and we're going to throw it away. I'm gonna sift the flour a little bit again. Just kind of pick it up and drop it in my jar just to get that air in there. Add half a cup of flour and a quarter cup of water and mix it really well, scraping down the sides. You're just gonna cover it back up. Remember to remark where your starter is at. It might be a little bit higher or lower depending on how much you discarded. Tomorrow's day 5, which means we're gonna start to feed our starter twice a day. Let it sit for another 12 hours and do it again at night. Good morning, it's day 5 and I took a look at my starter and it grew just slightly, not a ton of growth, but that's okay. Some growth is better than no growth. So we're gonna make this quick and easy because I have sleepers still. So we're gonna discard half again, just sift the flour, add half a cup of flour, a quarter cup of water. Don't forget to mark it, cover it up, leave it on the counter for 12 hours, and I'll see you tonight. Okay, we're on our second feeding of day 5. I've been watching my starter from this morning and I think the heat just really activated my starter and it grew about another inch in the afternoon. This is also the first time that it smells sour. The top is also very bubbly, looking down into it, which I haven't seen much of that before either. Okay, I'm gonna show you how bubbly it is when I move. See all those bubbles? That is what you want to see. Remember that it's not quite a mature starter yet, but we're gonna keep giving it a few more feedings, and as that activity increases, it will become a mature starter super soon. So again, what we're gonna do, discard half of this, add half a cup of flour, a quarter cup of filtered water, scrape down the sides, and leave it on our counter, and we'll see you in the morning. If you do not see any activity or any growth at this point, maybe skip tonight's feeding and give it another day. It might just need some warmth, need a little bit more time to activate, to jumpstart. You can try to feed it again in the morning and see how it does throughout tomorrow. If you don't see any growth by tomorrow night, you might have to just start over, unfortunately. Welcome to day 6. As you can see, I woke up this morning and my my starter has grown a bunch, which I'm super excited about. By tomorrow, you're going to have what's called a mature starter. Today, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna discard half, feed it half a cup of flour, a quarter cup of water. But first, I'm just gonna tell you that the smell smells great. You want a yeast sour smell, and we have definitely achieved that. I'm just going to change my marker here, cover it up, let it sit for 12 more hours, and I'll see you then. Just so you don't feel like you're wasting your starter on day 6, I chose to make pancakes out of mine. So I took the discard, added a tablespoon of melted coconut oil, a dash of vanilla, and a pinch of baking soda. And make a large pancake for me and my girls this morning as our snack. It's day 6 and it's about 8 hours after my feeding this morning, and I noticed that it rose quite significantly in those 8 hours, and it's actually starting to fall and sink. So that means that it's hungry and it's ready for another feeding. And you can also bake with this. I have reached the mature status of my sourdough. I'm excited. It smells sour, and a true test to see if it's ready to bake with or not is the float test. So you just take a cup of water and you're just gonna take a little bit of your starter, and if it floats on top of the water, then it's ready to bake with. If it sinks, then maybe give it another feeding, a fresh start. Let's see. There you go. My starter is ready to make bread successfully. If you didn't see a large rise today, give it another feeding tonight and see how it looks in the morning. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually going to graduate my starter to a bigger mason jar, because I can give it some bigger feedings and really grow my starter to make something like pancakes or maybe focaccia bread. I have a lot of good recipes that you can look forward to seeing soon. For now, I'm just gonna move my starter over to this jar, give it another feeding, and let it rise a little bit more, and then bake with it tomorrow. Okay, you made it to day 7 and you're excited to start baking, and your starter is mature enough to actually do so. I am actually making a cake for my nephew's first birthday tomorrow, and I decided to make it out of the sourdough starter that I just started. My husband thinks that was a little bit bold, but I have full confidence that it will be just fine. And I definitely think it has been, because I used it this morning to make the sourdough sponge to start his birthday cake, and it has performed just the same as my other starter has. So I removed some of my sourdough starter. I needed 3/4 of a cup, so I removed that, and then I refed my starter. I added that 3/4 cup of my active starter to 2 cups of flour and some milk, and it is now creating this sponge. That active starter has now fermented that flour, that 2 cups of flour that I added to it. And now this fully fermented flour will be ready to bake with and use in the recipe. Your sourdough starter is mature and ready to make whatever recipes you like. So follow along, because I have lots of delicious and exciting recipes to share with you.